Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Hello and welcome, Catholic pilgrims. Today we are reading from Book 2, Chapter 7, and that can be found on page 51. What return shall I make to the Lord for my ability to recall these things with no fear in my soul? I will love you, Lord, and thank you and praise your name because you have forgiven me such great sins and such wicked deeds. I acknowledge that it was by your grace and mercy that you melted away my sins like ice. I acknowledge, too, that by your grace I was preserved from whatever sins I did not commit, for there was no knowing what I might have done, since I loved evil, even if it served no purpose. I avow that you have forgiven me all, both the sins which I committed of my own accord and those which by your guidance I was spared from committing. What man who reflects upon his own weakness can dare to claim that his own efforts have made him chaste and free from sin, as though this entitled him to love you the less, on the ground that he had less need of the mercy by which you forgive the sins of the penitent? There are some who have been called by you, and because they have listened to your voice, they have avoided the sins which I here record and confess for them to read. But let them not deride me for having been cured by the same doctor who preserved them from sickness, or at least from such grave sickness as mine. Let them love you just as much, or even more than I do, for they can see that the same healing hand which rid me of the great fever of my sins protects them from falling sick of the same disease. As many of you know, I have 2 adult daughters, and as they were going through their teenage years, I had a lot of anxiety over wanting to keep them safe from the experiences and situations I found myself in as a teenager. Outwardly, as a teenager, I seemed like a parent's dream child, mostly. Inwardly, though, and outwardly behind the scenes, I was not leading a moral life. There's a lot that plays into why, but I was steeped in a lot of sin, and I knew it. It's not like I didn't know that I was sinning. Now, I don't remember consciously thinking, oh, hey, this is a sin. But whenever you try to hide stuff, well, that's a clear indication that you know that something is wrong. Anyway, I didn't want my children to have the regrets that I have, and so I tried really, really hard to guide them as best as I could. And I still try. And they are such delightful, amazing young women. And to be honest, as their mother, if I had to go through all that bad in order to wake up and know how to guide them better, then I'm glad it was me and not them. I really do. And I'm grateful to God for the lessons and for the help. I'm also grateful that God has given them such strong faith and such helping grace to keep them free from the terrible mortal sins that I engaged in. St. Augustine today is praising God for preserving many and for also forgiving those of us that committed, as he said, wicked deeds. So maybe you are one of those people who, quote, have been called by God, and because they listened to his voice, they have avoided the sins which St. Augustine committed and recorded. Thank God for that grace. We must never wish that we have lived a life of sin just so that we can have the great conversion story. There are those of us that have had it, and thank God for that conversion, but it's not a more noble or honorable path. Better to have not added to the sins that were forgiven on the cross than to have grave sins that need forgiveness. The less we've wounded our Lord, the better. But I do thank God for his mercy and forgiveness for those of us that must learn the hard way. But that is all for today, Catholic pilgrims. The journey continues tomorrow, and until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.